floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much for coming. And welcome to the Feeling of Sound. I am a student of the Night Master, and my research is, the title is The Feeling of Sound, and it's dealing with music curating, performing, and connecting with and through music. And Catherine Cook is my research supervisor, the head of department also here. Let's continue to the next one. So the content of my research in my written research actually is a big part where I explain how to find what my question, my topic, how to define that, and how to localize it within a field of research. And then as a second part, I do a research, I dig into ASMR and the feeling of sound. And in the third part, I try to implement my findings into my artistic practice. So let's go to my research question. My research question is, what can I learn from ASMR about contemporary audience's perception, and how can I integrate these findings into my artistic practice? What is pardon. What is ASMR? I don't know, maybe you know. ASMR is an abbreviation for Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response. It's a term that is invented. It's invented by Jennifer Allen, who is herself a person experiencing ASMR, and it stands for a reaction that some people, a minority of people, have on certain triggers, like visual triggers and auditive triggers. So it's a reaction where people see something or hear a sound and then have a different reaction within their body, like, for example, a tingling feeling in the back of the head, or the cribbles or whatever. And it's so this is ASMR, and this Jennifer Allen has chosen the name in 2010 or later even, because she wanted a name for this, and she wanted to connect with other people who experience this phenomena, and wanted a name that doesn't sound too ungraspable, but she wanted something that sounds also kind of scientific in order to distance herself also from too esoteric fields. So, why? Did we have this already? No. Why ASMR? I don't know if I introduced myself already. My name is Laura van der Goltz. I am a music pedagogist. I am a violin player, a viola player. I studied historically performance practice or early music in the conservatory here. I graduated some years ago. And now I am in the Night Master, Innovative Performance Practice and New Audiences. And so where is the connection to ASMR? It seems a bit far, actually, I think, for people that don't know me, maybe. For that, I have several reasons, but one very simple, maybe a bit plain reason is, like, if you check out a Google search with ASMR, within 0.50 seconds, you have a very long number. I'm not going to read it in English, but you can read it. Results about ASMR. If you do the same Google search with Johann Sebastian Bach, which is, like, I think the most prominent composer in classical early music, the number is a little more tiny even. And then you have to think that Johann Sebastian Bach exists already for hundreds of years, like the thematic around him. I mean, he doesn't exist anymore as a person, but his oeuvre is still there. Why ASMR is just 10 years, and there is so much content lingering around in the internet. So there is some kind, I got fascinated, but how did I get to know ASMR, and how did I get to deal with this topic so far away from my practice? Since a long time, I, as a musician, had I also, like, music is my life. I've always done music, I've went to concert, I played concert, and I had experienced a lot of different formats myself. And I had a period when I myself was struggling with feeling involved, feeling addressed by classical music concerts. And eventually in the concerts I played, I got the impression that could classical music, like the audience was not representing the people I would like to address, the people I would like to share my music with as well, but there was a big part missing. So I went into the large field of music education, concert pedagogy. In German it's Musikvermittlung, and I think it's quite known that the classical music concert is like searching for its place in society, because the society is changing constantly. And I think Leonard Bernstein started a nice project with his young people's concerts already almost 70 years ago. So I was like, yeah, I think classical music is not just for an exclusive group of people, it's really for everybody. And I would like to work on that and really make it my artistic practice. So how can I bond or connect more with contemporary audiences? So I actually got to a dilemma that was that I wanted to learn something that didn't exist yet. So I didn't really know what to ask, because what do you ask when you don't know what you're looking for? And I got inspired by Raimund Vogel, who was doing a research on the concerts in context of rituality. He was asking, like, is the concert a ritual, yes or no? He wasn't really sure about that. So he examined some indigenous groups, cults, that for him were rituals. And then he was seeing, okay, so what is it that this is a ritual, and how is it similar or not similar to the concert? And then basically what he did was he was looking at something very strange, where, because being himself so immersed into classical music, he said, like, I need to look to the strange in order to get a new perspective on what I am actually talking about. So this was kind of, when I was reading this text, was kind of about the same moment when I was working with children. I work with children, and I saw this little kid with a basketball, like, and there we have to leave this for a second because the link doesn't work. And it was basically the same day that I had seen this on Spotify. And this one has, like, where is it? 951,000 clicks. And I was seeing this kid, like, really for a long time, scratching this ball, looking at it, feeling it, probably even, like, exploring it with all senses possible. And then I was back listening to this and I was like, yeah, what is actually this? What is it? And I realized that my fascination was like, I wanted to look for this like this fascination of sound, this like kind of listening where you're not just listening, but where you're like almost like eavesdropping. You want to really get close and yeah. So this is how I arrived at ASMR. About ASMR, I found out that basically it's different things within one thing. It's a phenomena, like a psychophysiological, neurological phenomenon, excuse me, and it's also a YouTube phenomenon, or Spotify. I said YouTube as a media phenomenon, which kind of is very interesting to me, because you're like, yeah, I mean the neurological thing is concerning just a minority of people, whereas the numbers of people that actually are interested into ASMR content in the internet, that are consuming this content, is so large that it's easy to conclude that maybe it's also interesting for people that don't have like a ASMR condition. So it's also appealing to the other part of society, people. The content generally is very specific in its atmosphere. Let's say it's most often the content is like a very private atmosphere, which comes from the fact that ASMR content usually is recorded very close. So the microphone is not like there, but right in front of the source of sound, which creates a kind of closeness. It's like putting your ear directly next to the source of sound. And but thematically, I think the content can be divided into two. You have a big amount of content that is dealing with personal attention. You can experience a haircut, a virtual haircut, or someone whispering you like, hey, how are you doing? So it's also, again, about personal attention, because you are addressed in a way, and it's a very intimate way to talk to someone, to whisper, for example. Or the other half is like the materiality of sound. So you have just sounds like we just had it. The sound, you can almost feel it in your fingers when you feel this kind of content. And I thought this was very interesting to see ASMR as these two-parted thing, and it actually brought me to go further in my thinking, and I divided my research in let's say 2-3 directions from that point on, and one of them was multi-sensuous perception from child to adulthood. I was thinking a long time, am I gonna say sensory? Am I gonna say sensual? Because it's very, very difficult to find a word that is not just like a trigger, a biological term of realizing an irregularity in your physical surrounding, but also to not be directly going into a sexual context, because in our times, feeling and is often like whether the one or the other, but especially in ASMR, even though there is a lot of sexualized content, I think the majority is really not about that. It's about feeling, and in many ways. So working with children, you can see it's a full body experience, making music, singing. And in the same time, I was wondering, like, does it ever stop? Because in concerts, we're sitting, we're directing, we're, as I said, brains with ears, we're really focusing on that one sense. And there is actually no proof that humans change their way of perception. There is a fact that we can learn to focus and channel our attention, but we're still, like all of our senses, are always active. Otherwise, we cannot create meaning. Furthermore, this brought me to the fact that actually we can also feel things that are not there, that actually our senses are kind of extended by imagination and memory. So like in this picture, you can see that if you switch out this picture, you can still, you know, like it's like this. Or if someone talks to you about pizza, you can smell almost oregano in your, like it's this kind of together working of the senses, which I became very interested in, and which also brought me to make a, this word is difficult to say, like I compared ASMR with synesthesia because they have a lot of parallels. They're both phenomena that exist in the neurological field. They're interested. The esoteric field, they're also interested in this. How often are like these very hard science and esoteric, they are interested in the same field. And then in the same time, there is a big demand for entertainment or art within that context. So I was looking back on art history and seeing like there is a lot of artists that have actually had synesthesia, or that made synesthesia art. So what could that be? Because if we go back to ASMR content is usually content that tries to trigger a reaction that is an ASMR reaction, like the tingling in the back of the head, or that is somewhat close to that. So actually non-ASMR people can also experience this kind of or a similar reaction towards that. So what is synesthesia art? We have synesthesia artists. These are art made by people that are experiencing synesthesia. But we also have art inspired by synesthesia. So that people get interested in how can I write a symphony with lights, and how can the light influence the sound of my composition, for example. I think this is very interesting that this actually was always present. Almost in every period you can find some artist that was doing this kind of multimedia or interdisciplinary art. But yeah. So from that point on, I was thinking a lot about how can I actually maybe also do something like this, but I felt like I needed to learn still a little bit more about ASMR, how it works. So I went to do some recording experiments. Sorry, I'm in French. Because how to implement it as a violin player, I was like, okay, so usually I play the violin. What can I do with this now? What can I do? So I went into the studio with a graduate from the art sound department, and we got the technology there for 2 days, and we were experimenting. Like, we had a plan to make, we had several settings. So you can see here, for example, we had one fixed microphone, and I was standing in front of the microphone and playing in front of the microphone with very high proximity. And here we had a fixed microphone, but I was moving. We had a binaural microphone which is able to track spatial movements acoustically. We had a binaural microphone, and I was actually walking around, and we had also several. I didn't have the space to put all of them, but like we also had experimented with a lot of microphones, normal microphones, and me moving or being static. So we had, in the end, we had 5-7 setups, and in order to have even a more broader view on how the setting of recording can influence the result, I also used voice, I also talked, and I used plucking the violin, playing pizzicato, playing soft, playing loud. And it was very interesting because like the first very obvious result we had was like, okay, very high proximity and violin with classical music, that doesn't work. Not possible, because the violin has such a big range of dynamics. It's because it's recording with high proximity. It's like putting the microphone directly in front of your mouth, and then playing the violin is like from 1 second you whisper and the next you scream. So it's the signal is the amplitude of this, it's too big, too different. It's whether it's inaudible or it just explodes basically the ears or the speakers or whatever. What was very interesting for me as well was that if I move while recording a piece, first of all, this is something new. I have to adjust, I have to like work on my technique to be able to move actually, because when you study first classical studies, I learned to play like this. Second one, chin off, is a bit different, but still to move around it's different. And also we learned that if you only have one instrument, actually the effect is not that big if I just move like this, because if you would have a big orchestra and you have already a bigger range of like occupying the space, the acoustic space. What I thought was very interesting for me as a player was that I suddenly had to consciously think about when am I going to do a step. I was playing this Bieber Passacaglia, for example, and then the question is like, if I play a bass, do I want to like step in the same time, or I want to do like a different kind of tempo within. And another point is shaping acoustic atmospheres. Classical music recordings are usually aim to reproduce a real concert. So you have all of the sounds that we hear right now. You have like maybe the computer, like you have environmental sounds, whereas in ASMR content usually is recorded so close and without any kind of surround sounds. So it's like acoustic white cube, you could imagine, that you have one sound and you put it on a, like in a white gallery on a white podest, whereas a classical music concert, you listen to it and you can feel that there is bodies within the room, there is people breathing and so on. So I learned that actually the way how I record, or how the person I work with records, has a very big influence on my artistic outcome, and that actually in many cases before I just gave this responsibility to the person I was working without considering taking my own personal decisions. So how can I implement this in my artistic practice? Exactly like this, actually. I decided to choose one aspect of ASMR in this first project, I decided to choose for personal attention. And I talked to my audience and I was telling them to feel comfortable, get comfortable, choose your place. And I started to ask them questions. Well, first I presented that I told them that I was going to play a piece that is very old, based in church music. And do you believe in angels? And I kept on going, talking that this piece was about angels. And for me, it's difficult because I don't even know if I believe in God. And so I kind of made a whole story, and eventually I also kept going with this bass that repeats in this piece. And then kind of try to keep the aspect of personal attention also while playing. I don't have a Baroque violin today. I used to play it on Baroque violin. And I try to really talk to the people through my music, but also through the text. And I did this as my first implementation that was the presentation I did last year for my first year master. I did 2 of these presentations, and it was very interesting because people reacted very differently on the music, especially my violin colleagues. They were like, yeah, I've played this piece, I know this piece, but I listened differently because the questions I asked in the beginning, and it was a bit like a guided meditation. It gave them the possibility to detach from their everyday life, and also it gave them an opportunity, not a forced one, but to take their own inspiration or imagination to go somewhere else. And yeah, so this was the first one I tried.
No, you have 3 minutes.
Because here it shows me 18 minutes. No? So this is wrong. Okay. Well, actually there's not a lot missing. I have another project foreseen for the end of June, which is Senti lo mare, and for this one I decided to focus on the aspect of really feeling with different senses. So I decided for a piece by Tartini, Sento lo mare, and I'm going to work with audio, visuals, and haptical triggers. I have 3 screens that will be a bit like a altar, a 3-part altar, and I will have close-ups, images from the sea. I will have my violin recorded in a different way, but I will use the composition as material to improvise on it. And I will have soundscapes, and I hope it will work. In front of each screen there is a box with items from the sea that you can put your hand in and feel while you listen and while you look to the images, movies, footage. So my goal is to put a contact microphone in that box so that, and then each one is different. So let's say this one, you have a microphone in the box and you have fragments, improvised fragments of the violin, and you look at sand moving. In the same time, while you move your hands in the sand, the sound that you create by yourself of your of your feeling, actually, your touching, will be sent as a live stream to accompany the violin playing. So this is like kind of a co-creative aspect, but it's also, this is what I want to do. I think I imagine this to be cool. I don't know how to say it differently. And then on the other one, you lack the signal, so you don't have it. But that means, I think it's interesting to have a difference between what you feel and what you hear. That one time you have this feedback, that it makes sense, that you have the ear and the hand experiencing the same thing. And here, you feel it, you experience the one thing with your hands, but you have something else on your ears. You have wind on your ears or something. And I would like to play with this. I think that gives me a lot of artistic tools. And this is basically my findings where, like, I can learn from ASMR. It's possible. Also as a violin player. I learned that questions can be findings too, that every finding brought me a new question. And I thought it's very interesting that, yes, there is a very big audience that is interested in content that addresses more senses, that addresses a human being as a combination of senses and imagination with a history, memory, and so on. My ASMR recording findings I already told you before, but it's interesting that this has an aspect of my practice as a violin player. And in the end, I think the biggest finding are actually my projects, because they're like the results I can do. And I think both of them can also work as a framework that I can use with different repertoire, with different filling, let's say. Instead of the beach and Tartini Sento Lumare, I can do it with a train travel. And instead of sand in the box, we have the fabric of the seats. And there is poems about train travel. So I think I found formats that I can keep working on with. And so I think this framework that I did was very inspirational also for my violin practice, because I focused more on how to play for someone, to really speak through my violin, and not just focusing on being like a medium, but really add my own part of the story as well. And that's it. I guess I shouldn't say that. But thank you so much for listening. And, well, I don't know if we have time for questions, or if this is later. If anybody has a question, I would love to answer them.
I assume there will be a few. Thank you, Lau. Thank you. Well, let's move to Lindsay Callahan, our external jury member, all the way from Dublin.
Thank you very much. I actually have been very into ASMR content at times, so I thought this was really, really interesting to see how you could be inspired by it to change your approach to interacting with the audience. And you said at the end it helped you learn how to play for someone.
Yeah.
And sorry, this might be a long question, but I'll get to the point. Is how much do you see the audience as one group, or how much do you curate with a particular audience or people in mind? Because why I'm asking is, one criticism of ASMR is for people who might be overstimulated, for example, by these sounds. Do you think about maybe having somebody like that in the audience, or have you just, or are you more thinking about the repertoire? That's kind of my question.
My starting point actually was not repertoire. It's a funny question, because I was just working with a group of students and they asked me, what is music curating? And I said, it's actually depends. I mean, it can be many different things. How I see it for myself, for my practice, it's because it's a mix from I collect material, for example, also a target audience analysis. I collect repertoire, associations that I have, thoughts that I have, memories that I like, all kind of stuff. And then I select. And the selection is already taking from my analysis for the audience, like for who am I gonna play, who do I think could like this, or if I have first a person, what could they like, and then what fits with like, is there a poem that I could use that actually, or is there a specific atmosphere that I want to create that people feel comfortable in? So actually I think, especially, I don't know if anybody else has in a music study done an installation before as a classical music player, but I decided for that because I think it can be for people that it's different to immerse yourself with headphones, and it's maybe not a group activity, but maybe yes, because you have 3 of them, and my plan is to have also open field boxes somewhere, so it's like a garden space, and you can decide to sit down or stand, I don't know actually, but you can decide to look into one, immerse yourself, but you can also just, the video you can already see, the field boxes you can already feel them as well, and maybe then you get into, your curiosity gets evoked, and you will also listen to the headphones and the violin, and then I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, it's really interesting, thank you. Because I was thinking about consent as well, but I think you've answered that, where you can decide to go or not.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Karen?
Any other questions?
Yes, no, you're talking about music curating, and then you immediately went to my word that I was thinking of, installation. But how would you do this in a performance venue? Because what you're in fact doing is taking music, your form of music, out of the concert hall and putting it into a museum or another type of location. But how would you combine ASMR and what you've learned and actually playing the violin in a concert situation?
Well, I think my first project was kind of that, because I was in a concert hall, and I decided, because I'm interested in technology and I'm interested in ASMR, but I am not a sonology student, I'm not an art of sound student. My actually skills towards technology are quite limited. So whether I have to find people to work together with, which I did in the past, and then I had a program where I worked with someone who made very beautiful soundscapes. And there was one big soundscape from the first moment of the concert until the end, which started with almost inaudible sounds, and then eventually it grew, and we had speakers all over that were different speakers. So it was also like, which I thought could be a nice stimulation for that people are not like this, but already the movement of the head. I learned this also I saw this with babies when I make music with babies. The moment that they start moving the head means there is an interest, there is a curiosity. And in that fact, I collaborated, and we chose pieces that stayed. They were less modified than what I'm doing now, but they were like woven into the soundscape basically. And their dramaturgy was like, they matched the soundscape, and that could be something you could also see as an approach.
Yeah.
But I think the angel thing there, I just got away from the recorded sound, and I took the personal attention aspect, and I also, for a last, these are already 2 answers for one question, but I have one third one. I think what I also learned to integrate in my violin practice is to really explore more dynamics. Because in my classical violin studies, I learned to project. You stand there and you play for an audience that is like far away, and even your piano has to be heard very far away. So my instrument can do so much more, especially in a room like this. When I move towards you, I can really explore different dynamics. And I think that's something I really like, that I had the chance to learn this.
Great, thanks.
Any other questions?
Well, there's a whole crowd here. I can imagine there are other people that have questions for you. There's space for that.
Well, sort of maybe. I think it's in addition to your question, like if you have an orchestra, for example, because you were talking about it in the beginning, is this something that you think you can only create as an individual for maybe a group or like
No.
just an individual audience, or is this something you can create as
with a big musician group as
and
well.
also like live instead
Yeah.
of recordings?
I mean, you know, I took ASMR as inspiration, but you can take almost, like, I think, first of all, you can take this kind of approach that I did, and you can take any other thing as it's basically conceptual curating. If you see curating in the far sense that it's also really diving into performance, mise en scène, programming, selecting everything together. Conceptual with thinking of audience, and it's actually innovative performance practice, I think. And on the other hand, if you really want to keep it towards the ASMR aspect, and you interpretate ASMR more as a curiosity to really listen to also the small things. Of course, you can do it with an orchestra. Amazing. You could even have like, you don't have to have the orchestra all sitting together already. You can put them, you can make a real life surround sound soundscape. You improvise smallest sounds. I mean, you can go to the audience and let them listen to the smallest details, which can be very interesting maybe for them, because when do you have the chance to listen close to an instrument if you're not a musician? I think there is a lot of possibilities. I think it's just necessary to dare to think a bit out of the box.
Thank you. There's time for one more question and one more answer. Hey, Louisa.
I was wondering, something related to what you answered to Catherine, when you say that it kind of that inspired by ASMR discovered a larger range of dynamics in the violin. I was wondering how this translates to your work with the repertoire, if you are also through that not only exploring the dynamics but also other ways of approaching the instrument itself.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry, I haven't played much the last week because I traveled. I gave a workshop, and I have a 20-hour work next to the studies. But for example, I had a concert for children lately, and I was also inspired by this. And there was, for example, a thing that I knew that a lot of them never had listened to the violin before. So I would start just go on, and you have Bach actually, but I mean, this is very basic, but I would decide maybe to play one part or an ornament a couple of times and really change it in dynamic. I would maybe improvise within the composition, which allows me then to have the flow of the composition. I mean, and still really go into different dynamics. So I'm actually using the composition as not as a score to play it, but as I don't know, as a poem to interpret. It's not a story I will read for you, but it's a poem that I will interpret for you. So I make my own sense of it, and yeah. I don't know if that is an answer.
Well, thank you, Laura.
Thank
the jury will go to. We will be in room 451. That's on the left side of the stairway.
Okay.
So if you can join us there in 15 minutes.
15 minutes. Okay, I can do that.
Good. Super.
Thank you for listening.
You're welcome.